Get the Intel, the podcast meant for those of us trying to find out what the hell is going on in the field. Here we discuss tools, techniques, and approaches that you can implement to streamline operations and let you focus on your craft.
Hello, Chad Gill here. I'm the host of the Get the Intel podcast. This episode is part of our Global Speakers Academy series. You shouldn't say that one poorly if you're a global speaker, but the GSA is an EO training program on storytelling and public speaking by communications experts. The GSA series is to highlight those members who have attended and the stories they have to tell. This episode is brought to you by Laminin Coaching. Laminin is a business coaching company with a focus on contractors in and around construction. We not only help with proposing solutions and methods, but we implement them in your business as well. After all, good ideas are not useful until they're implemented. So visit us at laminincoach.com to see the full range of our services. So joining me today is Michael Schoenberger, a public speaker and CEO of Sunco Communication and Installation Limited for 23 years now. He's also the 2022 Leaders and Edmonton Award recipient. He is passionate about business operating systems, having implemented the Entrepreneurial Operating System, which we run on and love as well, which has led to consistent double-digit growth at Sunco since 2017. Mike actively supports the entrepreneurial community by mentoring IMYEG and the U of A Venture Mentoring Service, or VMS, and serves on the advisory council of the NAIT and Mawji Center. He holds positions in the Board of EEO Canada and as the GSEA Canada National Committee Director for External Engagement. He's an acting board member of the Nanostics DX, a startup precision health company. In addition to his professional commitments, Mike enjoys spending quality time outdoors in the mountains with his wife Jackie, and throwing hard to pronounce words at me in my intro. So Mike, thanks for coming on and bringing such large words with you.
Yeah, appreciate it, Chad. A pleasure to be here today, and I'm looking forward to our chat. Thanks, you did well with the intro. Sort of throw those hard words at you.
It's like, I thought Canadians were supposed to be nice. Why would you do such a thing? So tell me a little bit about all of these words. So Sunco, let's start there. What do you do? What is the Sunco's function?
Yeah, so we're a business telecommunications company. We're national right across Canada, although we have clients that we serve worldwide. And what we like to say is we make business communications easier for our clients. And we do that by offering them wholesale services for their telco. So instead of buying from the major telco internet and phone lines and SIP trunks and VoIP services, they procure it through us. And we manage all the service and support and billing. As well, we're a VoIP provider for major manufacturers like Mitel, have our own UCaaS cloud, and we're an MSP where we look after people's communication needs on their computers, keeping them safe from all the nastiness that's going on in the world.
Right, exactly. And there's plenty of that in the digital space right now, especially. But that's not the topic of your talk. So tell us a little bit about what brought you to GSA and what the purpose of your talk that you were developing there is.
Yeah, it was a really cool journey as I've gone through entrepreneurship, and you realize, being part of EO and how much connection matters, and being part of a strong network, having strong mentors, peer-to-peer relationships. As we went through that week together, I learned and I settled on that real human connection is really what makes all the difference for me. And real human connection can change your life is what I settled on as the topic. And why I settled on, real human connection can change your life is it's a powerful statement in so many different levels, and there's so many different stories that I can pull from to share. I talk about my journey of mentorship with my father, and it really started. I guess if I go to the crux to it, when my father passed away very suddenly, when he was 58 years old. And, having worked with him for the 13 years prior and learning what it was, like to become an entrepreneur, hearing about his, entrepreneurial journey and having his mentorship and coaching along the way, I finally bought the company from him, was on my own, and he went from being that coach and boss to just a mentor. When suddenly out of nowhere, he passed away of a heart attack. And the significance of it was I felt it. He was in Phoenix, he'd retired, and from 1,000 miles away, the moment it happened, I can tell you the moment it happened because, it's part of my talk, but I got knocked to the floor with pain in my chest and nausea. I've never experienced anything like that before in my life. And, the feeling passed. I went home and the phone rang. And as soon as the phone rang, when I walked in the door, I knew.
That is not, yeah, that's a tough, that is a tough story behind it. And then, we hear a lot of the stories we heard at GSA are very emotional, very tied and very personal stories like that. How do you take that and convey it to an audience? And what do you hope the audience gets from it?
Yeah, so what I do is take how that was the beginning. So that was 20 years ago because it happened on February 18th, 2003. So almost 21 years ago. And that was the start of a journey. Like it changed because I no longer had my mentor and coach. And then for the next 20 years, do you hear that beeping? Sorry.
I do not.
Okay. For the next 20 years, I had to work on myself. And I just did my thing and ran the business and didn't really realize, but I couldn't talk about my dad. And I couldn't talk about, every time I would talk about it, I would get emotional, I would cry. And it pulled people to me. When we have our company events, we talk about my dad and the company history and what a mentor and coach he was to lots of people. But I couldn't really embrace his teachings and his memories. And then there was an EO event. So what I talked through the journey, my journey and my speech is how by joining EO and being in touch with this great community and attending events, I went to this leadership summit in Banff, Alberta in February 17th, 2021. And right kind of after COVID and things had suddenly opened up. It was the day before, I think it was February 17th, the day before the anniversary of my dad's death of 19 years. And it was this Wim Hof breathing exercise. And I didn't know anything about Wim Hof at the time. And all I knew is I'm at this leadership summit to try to work on myself as a human being. And, I was told to lean in. When you go to these things, don't second guess it, just kind of go with it, right? So I walk into this meeting room and there's all these, towels or blankets on the floor and this great big huge TV screen with this gentleman's face on it. And they're told, just take a seat on the floor. You're going to lay down. And for the next hour, 60 minutes, we're going to do continuous breath. And so and he goes, you might get these weird feelings and you might get this thing, they call it like these lobster claws, where you're just continuous breathing and your hands curl up and roll in and you can't release them no matter what you do. He goes, that's perfectly normal. Just continue to breathe. And when they talk about this continuous breath, it was like this. It was like that, no stopping breath for an hour solid, and highly oxygenating your body, and it becomes euphoric. It's almost like, ayahuasca or some of these trips that they use, these medications and mushrooms to go on journeys, but it's done with the power of breath. And so I'm like, okay, I'll lean into it. And so there's like 35 entrepreneurs laying on the floor, all breathing. And then you start hearing some people get emotional and tears, and I'm going through this and my mouth is drying out and I'm like, holy crap, this is uncomfortable. When all of a sudden then I felt the lobster claws. I got them and I experienced. So I'm glad he mentioned it because I never would have known. And then it was these waves of emotion started coming in and I started crying uncontrollably as I'm breathing and tight, and my body felt so incredibly tight. After a time, I don't know how long, all of a sudden I heard this voice in my head. And this voice in my head said, you are worthy. You are enough. You don't have to prove yourself to anyone. And I'm proud of you. And then it was like,
Wow.
this wave of emotion left me. And, even though I was still feeling emotion and crying, it was like part of myself that was locked up in this, deep vault inside of myself had released. And that was in fact the case. So it was, kind of a, hence the real human connection can change your life. That connection with my father transcended time and space. That I believe that on some level of energy, that was him communicating with me and unlocked, something inside of myself that will, that I carry on in my story.
Man, that is terrific. And kudos to you for doing it. I mean, there's a lot of people, and that's what I love about EO. It's what I love about entrepreneurs is the idea that, you walk into that room and there's a bunch of mats on the ground and like, hey, we're getting ready to do 60 minutes of breathing. There's a large portion of the room that would normally just walk right out. They're like, no, I'm sorry. I thought this was the lunch buffet. Yeah, but in EO, I don't know what it is about it, but it puts people at a mindset where they're like, hey, we've all tried some quote unquote crazy things, and some of them have worked and some of them have failed spectacularly, and all of them make for great stories. But what you're talking about, that kind of connection and stuff like that, and then being able to take that further. So, I mean, are you able to transfer that and to make connections with people that are around you, closer to you now?
Yeah. So then, that opened up. That was the beginning of my journey into self. So, shortly after that was in February, then in May of that year, I attended the Regional Leadership Academy. And the Regional Leadership Academy challenges, all kinds of things within you as a human being to grow as, I like to say to try to get 1% better. It really challenges you to become a better human, a better leader, a better father, a better coach, better in all aspects of your life. Warren Rustand was there at the Regional Leadership Academy, and he has something that he believes very strongly when he talks to people is a 10-10-10. 10 minutes of meditation, 10 minutes of a gratitude practice, like gratitude reading, and then 10 minutes of journaling and setting your intentions for the day. And so after attending RLA and the experience, and I had another experience of a release, with the memory of my father, where we created this sculpture. And I don't do it in my talk, but I'll give you a brief explanation of it now for additional context. But they just, we did this hard journey up the mountain, and then you had to journal what that journey was like for you. And some people, it was really slippery, and it was started at 3:00 in the morning, and we just powered through it, and other people made it up no problem. Other people, it was physically demanding. And then they had these stations, and one of the stations was an art station where we had to form out of clay whatever came to mind. And they had white clay and dark clay and stuff from the forest. And so I just randomly ran around the forest, and there was all these things that I just randomly picked up, and I made a sculpture on bark that was, the white sculpture. I made an image of my wife and myself, and my wife holding my son, who as a baby, even though he's 22 years old now, and with green leaves and things coming out of us. And then we sat on out of the brown clay. I made it in the shape of a human, and it symbolized my dad. And then I made like a little mountain and a little river out of the clay, and then put fungus, and it was on the bark, and it symbolized really for me, from death comes life. And my dad taught me so many things that it's now up to me to pass those messages on to the world, to pass those messages to my son, to share what I learned from that and further connect into myself and into others. And so the intent was, you create this sculpture, you set your intention, you share your story with everybody there, and then you just leave it there. You release it and let it go.
Really?
And so that was just another powerful experience that I haven't wove into my talk yet, but it's a future story for a longer version of my talk.
No, man, that's terrific. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, there's just a lot more world around us than we think there is. And, when you run into people who have found it, and there was a couple of people like that in the training that we were at, they could do that same type of thing. And that there's power there, and there's control, and like you said, comfort and release. I mean, It's what we're all chasing. We're just not looking at it. It's just you're looking at a less common place to find it, which is probably a whole lot easier than what some of us are chasing.
Yeah, and the interesting next step to that is it made me more open to trying things that I'd never done before. Being an entrepreneur that's go, 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 make decisions quick, act, 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 to slow down and do something like meditation and journaling and gratitude was something that I never would have considered had those series of events not occurred. But in true EO style, I'm like, why not? So I just started a regular daily practice of doing a 10-minute meditation, the gratitude journaling, and gratitude reading. And I noticed I've been doing it for 2 years now, and I notice a big difference. And so the differences are, I now can see the way that I used to react. So when I used to react to certain situations, I can now see myself wanting to react that way, but make a different choice. And so it's helped me to not only understand myself better, but communicate better with my team and my culture. So learning what holds me back and what holds other people back. So, reading more in some of the books that I've read and leadership books and being able to put those in practice, I now create the space and the time. So in my 10 minutes of positive reading, I'll read, a business book. To me, that's a positive book. And by reading 10 minutes a day, it's amazing how many books you can get through.
Yeah.
And so it led me to the next portion of my talk is, so, why would this be important to the people I'm talking about? And what would be holding them back from, getting their own connection with, real human connection there, or some tools that they could use. And I use the analogy of what we were taught at the Global Speakers Academy. And we have our protector, which is our instincts and things that we've been trained and we do, for hundreds of thousands of years. We were part of tribes and hunters and gatherers. And we had to be careful that we toed the tribal lines because we could get kicked out and starve and die, or we could get run across a lion. And the interesting thing is a lot of things that hold society back. So if you're talking about employees in a company, they're afraid of being made fun of. They're afraid of saying something and being wrong and maybe losing their job. So you're not going to get eaten anymore, but that same protector holds people back all the time. So, I call my protector Bob, I tell a little story about it. And then, I talk about engaging the projector, right? The projector is, what do I have to lose? What's the worst thing that can happen? If I speak my truth and people don't like it, well, that's their problem. I'll be fine. I can go home. And as they say in GSA, can have pad thai. Who doesn't like pad thai?
That's right. I love it. And Bob is clearly the guy who did not stay in the room for the breathing. And but your protector is the one who's like, hey, there's something here, or there could be. Let's check it.
Yeah. And so it's, how do you lean into that projector and not give in to your protector? And what I've discovered is it led me into so many other things that, I have a 30-minute internal podcast with all my staff, essentially, where I do staff interviews to help people get connected. I talk about conversations, like blame, like accountability, like judgment, how words matter. And we just have a conversation as a company over Teams, and realizing how much that helps people connect, that they, at the end of the day, people want to feel seen, heard, and understood. And how do we do that? We want to feel that in our own lives. So how do we set the stage to, with some tools and techniques to do that with others?
Do you think when you relay these instances to like your employees and stuff like that, do you feel like it brings them in closer? Or do they look and they're like, oh my gosh, that's very different than I am? Or do they lean in and kind of take comfort in, well, if he's willing to try it, I'll try it.
Yeah, so a lot of it, when we talk about, I haven't introduced some of the deeper stuff like the Wim Hof and some of the other experiences. I talk more about the meditation and gratitude and journaling practices. I will be sharing the Wim Hof experience when they all participate and hear my talk. but we get great buy-in. It's really neat that in the beginning, I've been doing it a year and a half. People were very shy because their bobs were kicking in and they didn't want to stand out in front of everybody else. But now that doing the staff interviews and asking people 15 questions has really started to pull them out of their shells. So now we get a much higher staff engagement and people are more open to being vulnerable, right? So part of my talk is how vulnerability creates connection. And being vulnerability isn't a sign of weakness. By leaders, and you're a leader in so many different aspects of your life, that a lot of people I'm giving in my talk to student entrepreneurs and next generation students. They're going to be leaders in their own life. They lead their own life. So how we show up helps predict what our future is like and what our life is like. So show up for you, and then you can show up for others. So it's really enabling the power of connection and what it is, and then talking about what it's not. And what it's not is Facebook and Instagram and one-to-many, it's one-to-one. And, if you're in a group, like a public speaking dynamic, it's, one to that group crowd, and how can you connect better with each other?
Yeah, and even within that group, you're trying to create many one-to-ones rather than one-to-many.
Yeah, so that's great, and I'll lead you I'll just tell you, or maybe I'll give you the opportunity to ask another question, then I'll tell you kind of how I close out my talk and what my send-off is all about.
No, I mean, no delay. Let's hear it.
Yeah, so you know what, and I'll do, and maybe we can try this as an exercise, and the people that listen can actually try it at the same time. So are you game for a bit of an exercise here? It's a bit active.
Hey man, if you walked in that room and laid on those mats, I can certainly handle it on a podcast.
Okay, so what we do is, this is an exercise of, I want you to close your eyes, okay, and put your hand on your heart. Okay, and so with our hand on our heart, we just say to ourselves in our head, I put love in my heart. Okay, and now I want you to think of somebody that has been a mentor, a coach, somebody that's influenced your life in a positive way, and has brought joy and helped shape you and helped you get to where you are in this moment. I want you to think about them for a moment. If they were here in front of you right now, think about what you would say, what you would tell them, what you would feel if they were beside you. And then now hold on to that feeling, hold on to that thought. And lastly, I want you to do, and this is the weirdest exercise, and I encourage people to try it in front of a mirror themselves, is you say to yourself, I love you, and your name. So I'm going to challenge you to say this out loud, Chad. So I'm going to say, I love you, Mike. And I want you to say, I love you, and your name.
I love you, Chad.
Yeah, and so it's an exercise to do in the mirror. So now when you open up your eyes and that feeling of that person that you thought of, that was your mentor and coach, they don't even have to be of this earth anymore. Reach out to them and tell them what they meant and how they guided you, and that feeling that you had in your heart. Why don't we tell people that we love and we care about? And if they're not with you and they've passed on, write a letter of what you would say to them. And if you're so inclined, share it with your family. And then I have people look around the room, and before I do the exercise, I have them look around the room, and I tell them in the beginning, I'm going to have you leave here feeling more connected to people in this room than when you arrived. And so before I have them do that exercise, I have them look around the room and make eye contact with somebody. And then after they do that exercise, I have them look around the room and try and make contact with somebody as well. And there's usually teary eyes, and because it's something that's pretty special, but we're all beings of love, and we just want to be seen, heard, and loved. And I find that a really powerful exercise for people to connect into that and tell people what they mean to them, especially when they're a mentor or a coach.
Yeah, and I mean, I think and it kind of gets to the idea, is like, why don't we tell these people these things if they mean so much to us? And they do, they're worthy of being told. Let them know. You would want to know.
I would want to know.
So, yeah, I mean, or you might be surprised. You may have impact on people you don't even realize that you do.
Yeah, and that leads towards the end of my send-off is, so, I summarize all my points like we're taught to do in the GSA. And then in my send-off, I tell the story of our fellow GSA mate where, it's not always people it's also having real human connection with those that you don't. When you're in a lineup of Tim Hortons, when you're in a lineup of a restaurant, when you're talking to a server, when you're dealing with anybody, engage and be curious a little bit, ask questions. You never know how their day's been going, and have somebody care about them enough to ask them a question about how they're doing and actually listen and be intent can make the difference. And there was a GSCA member that their talk was about. I'm going to call her Sarah. Sarah was coming to a yoga class every day and didn't really notice Sarah when all of a sudden Sarah wasn't there one day, didn't show up for class, and said, "Where's Sarah?" And they're like, "She committed suicide." And the speaker, his whole talk was centered around, why didn't we ask Sarah some more questions? She was super nice, never really checked in after class. We all just did our own thing and went on our phones. So sometimes that small moment of kindness can make all the difference, and sometimes as drastic as difference in life and death.
Wow.
So what are you going to do in the world to make your part to show real human connection? What are you going to do to connect actually with people and your team and your staffs and your siblings and your spouse, and not rely on what social media is doing to us, which is fighting for our attention, right?
Yeah.
You're enough, and so are the people around you. And then I give them a send off.
Well, I can tell you, and you've got me intrigued, and I am certainly interested to hear the whole talk. So do you have a website, or is it, and if people want to kind of book you for a talk or talk to you about it, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
So I'm currently working on my personal brand. Right now, it would just be through LinkedIn. My email is mike@sunco.ca. They can send me an email. I'll give details in the talk. I will have a website. It's in development. We're probably 3-4 months away. And I'm happy to, have an interview. The talk is structured to be like a workshop series or just a keynote presentation. 25 minutes to, I'm doing a couple of workshops here and tying in culture, connection, and networking for some students at NAIT, and making it an hour and a half. So, mike@sunco.ca is probably the best way to get a hold of me, and I'm happy to provide any information or be booked for a talk.
Well, fantastic. And I love the fact that a telecommunications guy is the one doing human connection. That's just an interesting it's funny that it lines up that way. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, I appreciate you joining me, and we'll make sure we post contact links to your site and your LinkedIn and stuff in our show notes. And like I said, I hope you get to connect with a lot more people.
Yeah, that's what the world truly does need more real human connection. It's kind of starving for it. And anything we can do, I can do to help the world become a better place and help human beings get what they so desperately need, which is connection to each other, and start, fighting this mental health crisis that the world is facing. And it starts one person at a time, one connection at a time.
100%. No truer statement made. Thank you, Mike. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Chad.
Thanks for listening to Get the Intel. We'll see you next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.